Let's turn to Mark Stoops for a second. And Mark Stoops calls out his fans saying they need to pony up more dollars for NIL money. Caleb, your thoughts on what Kentucky fans should say to that? Because that has been the situation with I think Ole Miss has done that with Lane Kiffin. Now Mark Stoops is doing it with Kentucky. How did they respond to that? Is it a good move or a dumb move by Mark Stoops?
I think it was a good move by Mark Stoops, and I think this is going to reignite the fight between Mark Stoops and John Calipari. I think the code for this was, you want us to compete with these schools, stop spending so much on basketball. That's what he's really saying, I think, personally. And I don't blame him at all for saying this. Look, Mark Stoops has done as good of a job as possible at Kentucky over the past few years. And I know Jimmy brought up earlier. I know we've heard earlier about how he pads his resume with 3 easy wins, but he does play Louisville every year. He has to play Louisville every single year. And they had some really good teams while Mark Stoops was there, including some Bobby Petrino teams and including the team this year. So it's not like he's and yes, the other 3 patsies, a lot of SEC schools played 3 patsies and 1 Power 5 school outside of that. A lot of them do that. So I think Mark Stoops has done an incredible job. And I think what Mark Stoops is saying is, look, we're not going to be able to get the players location-wise that Georgia and Alabama can get because we're not in that area. But if you give us enough NIL money and just give me a little bit more to work with, I could take this program to heights that seem impossible. And I think that's what Mark Stoops is saying is just give me something to work with to get an advantage over some of these other schools where I can steal some players out of Georgia or Florida or anywhere else.
Does it have any effect though? Do any of those boosters say, "Oh, okay, you got me on that one, Mark. I'm going to give you some more cash"?
I think it might. I mean, look, in the Moneyball era, because NIL is ushering in a Moneyball era to a certain degree, I think Kentucky is going to start caring more about football. And the reason is because you can't, even Kentucky, football's a bigger revenue producer than basketball is. And you can't look at that if you're the administration and if you're the boosters. And if you're the boosters now, you can't just throw money to fix a thing. You actually have to be meticulous with where you dole out your cash. And if you're looking at that and you're looking at how much more valuable football is, you're going to start saying, well, basketball is always going to be here. Let's invest in football. Dave, you know this more than I do. You can have a great basketball program and not really invest in it. You can't have a good football program and not invest in it. Like that's crucial.
There was a time where Tennessee's basketball budget was like $10 million. Well, Gonzaga can come up with $10 million, and they did, and they went from being a mid-major to a real competitor. Turning around football, though, takes about $100 million. There's a big difference there. And I don't know that Mark Stoops gets a great response from the Kentucky fan base, but he gets a better response than Lane Kiffin. And here's why. Because he's been there for a while, and he's proven it. He's not viewed as a fly-by-night coach. He's had other overtures from other schools, and he stayed at Kentucky. So I don't know that it has a great effect as far as their NIL dollars, but I think it has a bigger effect than Lane Kiffin when he's kind of thrown in those little hints along the way that, hey, it's hard to compete with this NIL money. At least Mark Stoops is just coming out and saying what he's wanting to say.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's doing. And look, if you're Kentucky, Mark Stoops is in it for the long haul at Kentucky. Like you said, he's turned down other overtures. I think partially, Dave, you talk about good jobs. I think coaches always think about going for the national championship or going here for that. What if you're at a school where you basically have earned yourself a lifetime contract because of how good you've done, even if it's not winning titles, and you know you're going to collect a check every year as a salary, a pretty good one too? Why throw that away for massive expectations if you go to Alabama or wherever you would go if you were hired at a higher profile school?
So let me ask you this. Who's more likely to be a preeminent program in not only the SEC, but the nation? Is it Ole Miss or is it Kentucky? Portions of the program brought to you by Sports Treasures, carrying over 5 million sports treasures and so much more. Follow on Facebook for the best sports memorabilia, daily updates. Just go to Facebook, look for sportstreasurestn.com, sportstreasurestn.com. So if I made you bet on one of those two programs, which one's the preeminent one first? Because you're right, there's going to be pressure to spend more money in football, and there's more money coming in, even with the bad SEC television contract. So there's going to be more pressure to spend money on football and be a part of that 12-team playoff. So who gets better first?
I think Kentucky. I think Kentucky has more NIL money. That's crazy to say, but because of Kentucky basketball, the boosters.
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and because of the boosters in Kentucky basketball, and look, I know John Calipari has all these one and dones. I don't know how many of them care or not, but Dave, I'm sure there's a few NBA players who play for Calipari that might feel some loyalty to Kentucky and would want to see the football program do well, aren't there? There's got to be a few. I mean,
yeah, I mean they're making $1 billion in the NBA.
Yeah, so why not call Anthony Davis up and be like, "Hey, man, we could use you for football," and promise him some deal to come back every year and you'll have your name hanging here. Just promise these NBA players you'll dedicate something to them if they write a check for the football program. I mean, I think
I have no argument with that. Rick Terry Jewelry Designs, they want to be your jeweler looking for affordable game day jewelry. How about the Fire Opals, a Tennessee tradition? RickTerryJewelry.com. RickTerryJewelry.com. Okay, not that this meant to be a Kentucky Ole Miss question, but who leaves first, Stoops or Kiffin, out of frustration because there's not as much NIL money as they would like?
Kiffin, tough. But here's why it's tough.
I don't think Kiffin's going to have the same opportunities, though.
Exactly,
because of what he did to Tennessee.
Because of what we know he's doing at Ole Miss. By the way, and if anything's going to do Kiffin in, if anything's going to hurt Kiffin long term, it's the biggest open secret in the world that he wants to leave, which makes it hard to recruit. And
yeah.
So I think but I still think Mark Stoops, I think with the playoff going to 12 teams with NIL money, I think Kentucky is seeing an avenue that I think the 12-team playoff changes everything. Kentucky fans see if we invest in that, we could get to the 12-team playoff. May not get to the top 4 SEC, but you can get to the 12-team playoff every few years. And so I think you're going to see some more money pour in at Kentucky. And I think Stoops likes the situation he's at in Kentucky. Very much like Rick Barnes at Tennessee in basketball, by the way. Rick Barnes is in a good situation at Tennessee in basketball. I know he flirted with the UCLA job, but Dave, why would you take the UCLA job with the pressure when you can just stay close to home if you're Barnes and be beloved coaching at Tennessee?
Yeah. I mean, I think that he played that up to get more cash. I think it was pretty much that simple. I mean, yes, he's beloved at Tennessee. He's close to home. I know UCLA is UCLA, but yeah, that would have been a heck of a move. I didn't like. That's the first time I've seen him be a little awkward in how he handled dealings. I think he's a by the book type of guy and straightforward. You'll never have an awkward cider if you go to Tennessee Cider Company. That's tncidercompany.com. And the promo code HAT, use the promo code HAT to receive some free swag with your cider that you can order from pretty much anywhere in the United States of America. It is awesome. So tncidercompany.com. So in the end, you think that Mark Stoops calling out the boosters at Kentucky is a good thing?
I do. I think this is a fight that Mark Stoops has been involved in for a while. And I think he's ready to go public with it because I think he's trying to let Kentucky know, hey, basketball can still be good. It's not going anywhere. There's enough money to put into the football program now to make this good and make it compete. I think that's what Mark Stoops is screaming right now, is put money into the football program. And by the way, in defense of the Kevin O'Neills and the Wade Houstons, well, not Wade Houston because he didn't care, but in defense of Kevin O'Neil,
he cared about soap operas.
Yes, you've told me the stories of Tennessee basketball in the 90s and how little Doug Dickey cared. Well, you could understand the frustration of certain coaches then if there was no investment in Tennessee basketball. And everybody touted Bruce Pearl because they're like, oh, he didn't complain. I'm like, well, the investments were much bigger in Tennessee basketball when Bruce Pearl got there than they were when Kevin O'Neil was there.
Well, I'll give you a little bit of insight, too. It was Isaiah Victor, who Tennessee didn't go to bat for to get him qualified academically, but they went to bat for a defensive lineman that was like a second stringer, I can't remember, and got him eligible. That really stuck in Kevin O'Neill's craw, and that was part of the reason that thing went south. Isaiah Victor was a turning point, probably for the better. It's more exciting basketball, but was a turning point that many people don't know about.